going to read another chapter from my book, Fighting for Your Destiny. Chapter 10, Righting All the Wrongs. A verse from Genesis 32. And Jacob went on his way, and the angel of God met him. And when Jacob saw him, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. How blessed it is to know that you're in God's will. God had freed Jacob from Laban at last, but he needed strengthening for what lay ahead. He had no idea what sort of reception he would get when he reached his homeland, but he knew that it would take more courage than he personally was capable of. There were so many loose ends to be tied up, so many things to put right, so many hurts to be healed. He now had first-hand experience of what he put his own brother through because of the way he had been treated by Laban. How could he ever make amends for that? Esau had every right to hate him, but what was done and could not be reversed. How could this situation be healed? Genesis 32. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now, and I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. This was not the sort of news Jacob was hoping to hear from his messengers. Esau coming with 400 men. He must still be fuming after 20 years. Jacob began to quake. He had to quickly devise a plan because he knew his brother was capable of murder, and he was surrounded by women and children, whereas Esau was coming with an army. Genesis 32. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and stressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and the camels, into 2 bands, and said, If Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. There's nothing quite like adversity to drive us to God. This situation certainly made Jacob turn to God and pray in desperation. Genesis 32. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abram, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which said unto me, Return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I'm not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I'm become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. It's strange how at one point Jacob could believe God for himself, and had proved in his own experience that God could be trusted to fulfill his promises. But now he was a man with responsibilities, and found that he had to start building up his faith all over again. He realized his faith was not strong enough to include his dependence. He needed to sort this out with God. I find it interesting to note that instead of referring to God as his God, he went backwards and addressed him as God of my father Abram and God of my father Isaac. He knew God had respect for Abraham and Isaac, but he wasn't sure whether he personally still featured in God's plans. What Jacob was going through is what each of us will have to face at some point. I've been actively serving God in the ministry since I was 15 years old, and during all these years have grown very strong in faith because I had practical experience of God providing for my every need in every circumstance. When I became a mother, however, my attitude changed. I began to get worried about all sorts of insignificant things, thinking that I was just being responsible. For instance, I would rush round to the doctors and fret over every little pain or cough the children had, telling myself that I was just checking things out so that nothing serious was going on. I'd become totally reliant upon the doctor's considered opinion, even though I didn't administer the drugs and antibiotics he tried to get me to use. I just needed him to put my mind at rest. I remember vividly one occasion when Maurice and I had booked to take the family to a conference. Because we had 3 children, all under 10 years of age, we had booked to use 2 rooms, but both had double beds rather than the twin beds as arranged. I got so stressed about it that I wanted to rush round to the office to get everything changed, even though I already knew that the facilities were all booked up, and we'd been told when getting our keys to the rooms that these were the only ones available. Oh, I was so upset, hot, bothered, and complaining that this situation just wasn't suitable. And surely they should know that we need something more practical for the family. Suddenly, Maurice turned round to stare at me with a look of complete bewilderment on his face. Honestly, Joanna, I can't believe how negative you've become. You used to be so full of faith. It was horrible to hear. The words cut through me because in that instant I could see myself. My words were ringing in my ears, and I knew that what he had just said was perfectly true. I didn't want to be like this. What had happened to me? Well, I'll tell you what had happened to me. The cares of this world. In this case, my fears concerning the children were like weeds which had grown up and were now choking that beautiful fruit of faith which had once been growing so strongly within me during my idyllic years of independent freedom. But they were choking me because I was allowing them to do so. I hadn't recognised that they were weeds. I thought this was part and parcel of being a concerned mother, that it was my duty to feel like this. But I was wrong. The best gift I could ever give my children is for them to know, by my words and lifestyle, that our God can be trusted. If God Almighty says he will look after you, then you can be sure that he will keep his promise. Jacob didn't need to be afraid. God had led him to this very place because he needed to go back to where the problem began. It's not always enough to feel remorse. Very often we need to do something about it because we've left behind hurting people. There is an incident in the book of Kings where one of the sons of the prophets was out doing some work in the woods when the axe head detached from the handle and fell into the river. He ran to the man of God, Elisha, and told him the problem, explaining how serious this was because the axe had been borrowed. Elisha knew exactly what to do and asked him to show him the place where it fell. As soon as he was shown the spot, Elisha threw a stick into the water and miraculously the axe head floated to the surface. But it was necessary for him to throw the stick in exactly the right place. Jacob needed to put right what was wrong, and because this was all part of reconciliation, something very dear to God's heart, there was no need for Jacob to worry. God would help every step of the way if he could just put his trust in him. Without any further ado, God spoke very clearly and assured him there was a future in his mind for Jacob to look forward to. Yes, God had special plans, and he would bring him through this difficulty also. Genesis 32. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Knowing that God was aware of all that was going on in Jacob's life, he prepared a very large present of assorted animals. 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine, 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 foals, just to give to his brother Esau in the hope that this would soften his heart towards him. He instructed his servants to take the animals drove by drove to his brother, allowing plenty of space between each drove, and with each drove to inform his brother that these were presents for him from his servant Jacob, who was following on behind. This procedure went on for most of the day. During the night, as he was lodging with his company, he gathered his wives and children together and sent them also over the brook to meet his brother Esau. So now Jacob was left alone. Everything he possessed was at Esau's mercy. He needed this time to prepare himself to face the inevitable. Just one touch from the king changes everything. And this is the scripture from Genesis 32. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaketh." And Jacob said, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." And he said, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince thou hast power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." And Jacob asked me and said, "Tell me, I pray thee, your name." And he said, "What is it that thou dost ask after my name?" And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, or Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. That meant he limped. So, you want a touch from God, do you? Jacob didn't know what had hit him when he came into contact with that spiritual being. Whether it was God personally or an angel, it didn't make much difference. His life, and body for that matter, could never be the same again. The priests under the old covenant were not allowed to touch anything unclean as if it would defile their holiness. But it was different with Jesus. Anyone who reached out and touched him, wanting something from him, was changed in an instant, and Jesus would feel virtue leave him rather than uncleanness defile him. Something surreal and unbelievable had just taken place in the life of Jacob. The Bible states that he wrestled with this man for some hours until daybreak. The astounding thing about this account is that Jacob would not submit and let go, even when this being touched him in the hollow of his thigh and put it out of joint. The fundamental character of this man had not changed in the slightest. He had been prepared to cheat, twist and connive to get the promise in the first place. There was no way he was letting go now. In Jacob's desperation, he defied the command to release his attacker, saying, "No way, bless me first." He was so desperate that what had been promised should be fulfilled, that he was prepared to even fight with a spiritual being. Yes, he was actually fighting for his destiny. Wow. How dare he speak with God like that? Wow, I can't believe that God will let him get away with it. Who is this man, and what relationship did he have with God for this scene ever to take place? He was a chosen vessel. That's who he was. He was the servant of the living God who had been called to head up God's chosen people. Doesn't matter whether we approve of his lifestyle or not. He was God's choice, and we had better be careful how we speak or think about him. 1 Chronicles 16 says this, "Touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm." Psalm 105 says the same, "Touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm." To criticize these people, we do so at our peril. They are there for our examples to see the way God deals with his children. Yes, Jacob was a worm, but God was going to make him a mighty threshing instrument. Psalm 22. "But I am a worm and no man, a reproach of men and despised of the people. All they that see me laugh me to scorn. They shoot out their lips, they shake their heads, saying, He trusted on the Lord, that he would deliver him. Let him deliver him, seeing he delighted in him. But thou art he that took me out of the womb. Thou didst make me hope when I was upon my mother's breasts. I was cast upon thee from the womb. Thou art my God from my mother's belly. No, this was no ordinary man. God knew this man when he was in his mother's womb. He foretold of the events that would take place in his life when his mother couldn't understand the distress she was going through whilst pregnant. God informed her, without the midwives knowing or seeing on a scan, that she was carrying twins, indeed 2 nations in her womb, who would war and fight against each other in the years to come, and that this child, who was to be her last born, would end up taking the place of the firstborn. Yes, this was a special man who was earmarked by God for something special. He prevailed with God and stood his ground in his desperation for a blessing, even though it cost him dearly. And he would forever be disabled and walk with a limp. It cost him dearly, but it was certainly worth it, because God himself approved him and changed his character. He passed the tests. He'd learned many hard and arduous lessons. He'd suffered and not complained, realizing that he was nothing better than a worm. For the love of a woman and the faith that believed that eventually God would sort things out, he had endured his years of torture, and now God was going to bless him. Genesis 33. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the 2 handmaids. And he put his handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. And he passed over before them, and bowed himself to the ground 7 times till he came near to his brother. This was the moment he had been dreading. Yes, he'd had an encounter with God, but this was a challenging sight, to say the least. If Esau had come alone, he would have been worried enough, but here he was heading 400 men. He quickly divided his handmaids and wives with their respective children into groups and made them pass before him, keeping Rachel and Joseph at the rear, just in front of him, if there was a need to run. As he passed before them, he bowed to the ground 7 times in the hope that this act of respect and submission would appease his brother. Oh, bless the Lord! Jacob was not the only one to have changed. God had also been working on Esau. Getting down from his beast, Esau ran to meet Jacob, embraced him, and fell on his neck, weeping as he kissed him. This must have been a fantastic sight to behold for everyone who knew how much Jacob feared this meeting. The joy in that camp must have been infectious as the release overwhelmed them all. Esau was eager to know about Jacob's life and who these people were who were accompanying him. Jacob enthusiastically shared how God had been gracious to him by blessing him with all these wives and children, and expressed his desire that he would accept the gift of his animals which he had sent before him. After much urging, Esau accepted the gift and wanted very much to accompany Jacob back to their family home. But Jacob made excuses, saying that the children were young and couldn't travel too far in one day. They would probably follow on shortly. Mission accomplished. He had done what he set out to do. It had been a frightening prospect, but he had faced his fears and tried to put things right between himself and Esau. He decided not to go to his father's house, but to travel on to Succoth, where he built a house and made booths for his cattle. Seeing his brother after all these years and making peace at last was enough. Brothers are brothers, and Esau was his only brother. But he was well aware that continual contact with him would only ultimately lead to disaster, for they were not serving the same God. As it says in Amos chapter 3, can 2 walk together except they be agreed?